The biggest thing that stops everyone that I found is that what is stopping every human being isn't actually logical, it's emotional. I developed a methodology that is called the aligned intelligence. Inside of it, what we do is we don't actually separate business and relationships. So we help entrepreneurs be able to live from, stop secretly struggling, live from their true self, and then really create fulfilling relationships in business and life. And so we don't teach coping mechanisms. We get to the actual root cause of every single problem, resolve it. And then from there, what we do is inside of that, we help them create 6 and 7 figures in their business. Because once we live what we're really meant to do, why wouldn't we want to make as much money and develop, the impact that we really want in the world? And so we just kind of do it all together in the right order using a consistent recipe. For me, it was when I first started out, I couldn't understand how it is that if you read any kind of spiritual book, it's like everything is inside of you, right? Like you shouldn't need anything outside of you. It's all within you, right? But then yet when you go into the practical world of business, it's like, okay, but how? How specifically? Right? Like it feels like there was, to me, it feels like the challenge was really between there is this spiritual world and then there's this practical world. And I would either hire people who were too spiritual, which then I didn't feel like they gave me enough practical, or they were so practical in the business world and they would be like, oh, no, business isn't emotional, which is so not true, number one. And number two, the biggest thing that stops everyone that I found is that what is stopping every human being isn't actually logical, it's emotional. Because all behaviors are actually emotional, they're not logical. So they were wrong, is what I'm really wanting to say. And I don't mean that as a judgment. I'm not saying they were trying to be wrong. They just didn't know any different. Whoever taught them the same way. And so for me, it was about clearing all of that up. And so going back and really uncovering what is the root cause. So what I'm saying about the root cause, I'm not saying that we become a better version of ourselves. Because the reason why 98% of all personal development doesn't work is they're trying to enlighten their ego. Your ego never gets enlightened. You're not going to bring, light to darkness. Darkness doesn't have to be light. You just stop operating from it, is really what it is. I don't know if that's too subconscious or too deep for it, but that's what's really happening. And when you ask for personal challenges and why things, what did I see when I first started out that changed in my methodology? I realized that everything that I had been taught in personal development was wrong. And when I uncovered that and then found the original root cause of where the false self gets developed and then saw how to clear it, we're not trying to improve ourselves or fix ourselves or better ourselves. Rather, we're really removing the trap from being in a false self so that we go back to operating as our true self in any situation, any circumstance, and with any type of person. We're the only group coaching program that supports people individually, even though they're in a group. We personalize it to each person inside of this methodology that we do so that we're really coming into their lives and then we're helping them clear all the blind spots in their lives, which is why their life transforms so hugely in such a short period of time, right? 8 weeks is like nothing. One of the greatest ones, like one of the greatest transformations I've seen as far as financially, like that I could say, in like the shortest amount of time, was a guy by the name of Jim Bayou. He left us an amazing testimonial where we healed his original core trauma. And then within the 8 weeks, and he made more in 8 weeks than he had in the previous 5 years combined. So he became a millionaire for the first time in 8 weeks. The more succinct way I could say that is he went from a financial plateau to financial freedom in 8 weeks, but living fulfilled. That is like one of the biggest things that happened. I really do believe that when we're born whole, perfect, and complete. And then inside of that, we have a oneness with everything and everyone. There is no separation, right? So that is the connection to the trees and the animals and the oneness, right? And then what happens is there becomes this break in trust, right? And this is the birth of the ego that I'm talking about, like the birth of the false self. And then inside of the birth of the false self, if inside of like seeing this backwards now, all in hindsight, it's like the only thing keeping us from a life without any limits is a mistaken idea that we think that we have to do something to be free rather than we have to give up something, which is our false self, to come back home to ourselves and then regain and live inside of that oneness, right? And then from that oneness, now when we operate inside of a business and so forth, coming back to the pragmatic, really then that just becomes then from coming back to oneness, that just becomes a vehicle for our natural self-expression to be expressed, right? Like if we look at an oak tree, and watching it grow, an oak tree doesn't believe in limitations. It doesn't go, oh, I can't really grow to the fullest extent of my oak tree because I'm taking up too much space or too much room, so I need to be less so others can be more, right? It literally just continues to grow in its biggest expression. And to me, that is why they're all in the same, right? When we are one with everything, we can also appreciate that in exactly what I'm talking about, this mistaken idea, right? And doing something rather than all business is really just mastering the relationship game. Any business only exists to solve a problem, which is the root of what you're saying, is to be of service. The truth be told, right? And I'm not saying that people can't manipulate that or do different things with it, but the truth is that being of service is the core at why any business exists. So yeah, I really believe that when we can align being of service with what it is that it is our natural self-expression, or what impact or purpose we most want to give back to the world, what happens is we can live a life that without any regret, right? Which is the greatest thing to me, is not to have any regrets whatsoever. So really being able to play the full game of life to the fullest. I think the biggest mistake that people make is not that they have doubts, but they don't challenge them. Like the biggest mistake I see people make is they never question their doubts. And so what is funny to me, and I'm saying this not as a judgment to them, because that's what I used to do until I really awoken to the truth that is how life really works and how we are meant to work with it. And the funniest thing to me about all of this is that most people are afraid to do something because it's risky. But yet, Joseph, have you noticed no one gets out of here alive?
Oh, I've noticed.
Right?
Yeah,
So it's like, isn't like, what are we really avoiding risking? Nobody gets out of here alive. And so the funniest thing to me is when I came to acceptance of my death, when I accepted that, and then it was like, oh, this is so funny. How do I want this game of life to play? How do I want to go with this? Right? How do I want to really make this be an incredible life? When you start playing the game from the reverse, right? From the end in mind, there's no way you cannot live an incredible life. And that's what I would encourage everybody to do, is to really look at where you're avoiding looking at your death.
Thank you for that. Thank you for
Thank
everything
you.
that you've brought to the table today. And thank you for being on the program. Would you kindly let the audience know whereabouts they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can just go to it's miahewett.com. So miahewett.com. And they can pick up my book right on my website. So thank you so much, Joseph. It's been an incredible, conversation. Love how deep you're willing to go. It's been really awesome to be here. Thank you so much for having me.